Imagine standing on the balcony of a penthouse you spent 15 years bleeding to afford, looking down at the city, and feeling an overwhelming, terrifying urge to jump. Not to end your life, but to end your success. Every single week, elite executives, brilliant artists, and top-tier professionals intentionally set fire to their own creations. They leak their own secrets. They miss critical deadlines. They blow up stable relationships or show up completely unprepared to the most important presentations of their careers. From the outside, the world looks on in absolute horror, calling it a tragic lapse in judgment or a sudden breakdown. But behavioral psychology reveals something far more chilling. It isn't a mistake. It is a highly calculated, deeply subconscious rescue mission. When the pedestal of perfection transforms into a maximum security prison, your brain will choose a catastrophic collapse just so you can finally stop running. This is the hidden architecture of why winners choose to fail. To understand why a rational mind would work so aggressively against its own self-interest, we have to look at what happens when you actually win. On the way up, you are the underdog. Every victory is celebrated, and every failure is just a lesson. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. But once you occupy the top spot, the psychological physics completely invert. The joy of climbing is instantly replaced by a paralyzing fear of falling. Psychologists call this the burden of the sustainable baseline. When you deliver a masterpiece, that masterpiece is no longer your ceiling, it is now your floor. If you operate at 99% efficiency, you haven't just missed the mark, you have failed. When peak performance becomes the mandatory standard, success ceases to feel like an achievement. It begins to feel like a relentless, suffocating obligation. The reward for doing incredible work is simply the demand to do even more incredible work. When the pressure of these infinite expectations becomes completely unsustainable, the human brain deploys its first defensive layer, a cognitive strategy known as self-handicapping. First identified by researchers Edward Jones and Stephen Berglos, self-handicapping occurs when an individual deliberately creates obstacles for themselves before a performance even begins. Think of the elite athlete who stays out partying the night before a championship game, or the brilliant executive who mysteriously forgets to review the data before a massive board presentation. Why do they do it? Because it creates a brilliant psychological win-win situation for their ego. If they fail, they have a tangible, external excuse. They didn't fail because they weren't smart enough, they failed because they didn't prepare. Their core identity as a genius remains perfectly intact. But if they somehow manage to win despite the obstacle, their status is magnified. They aren't just talented, they are supernatural. It is a preemptive strike against the universe, allowing them to control the narrative of their own downfall. But self-handicapping only explains the preparation for failure. To understand the total execution of a lifestyle meltdown, we have to go deeper into a phenomenon called the upper limit problem. Coined by psychologist Gay Hendricks, the upper limit problem suggests that every single one of us possesses an internal, unconscious thermostat for how much success, love, and visibility we believe we are allowed to tolerate. This thermostat is calibrated early in life based on childhood programming and societal expectations. When you experience a sudden surge of extraordinary success, you blast past your internal settings. You enter an emotional zone that your subconscious perceives as fundamentally unsafe. You feel exposed, visible, and dangerously separated from the tribe. Instead of enjoying the success, an internal alarm goes off, shouting, "You don't belong here." To turn down the heat and bring the emotional temperature back to a comfortable, familiar level of struggle, the subconscious mind initiates a controlled burn. It forces you to mismanage money, pick fights with key allies, or make reckless public decisions. You are literally breaking your own environment just to get back to a baseline that feels normal. Quick question. Think about the biggest, most significant goal you have ever achieved. After the initial wave of excitement disappeared, did you immediately start worrying about how you were going to lose it? Did a strange anxiety creep in, telling you that the other shoe was about to drop? If you felt that, you have already experienced the psychological shift we are talking about. You bumped right into your own upper limit. This boundary line becomes lethal when it collides with the third and deepest psychological layer, Chronic impostor syndrome. When a high achiever reaches the absolute peak, a terrifying existential question emerges. What if I just fooled everyone? The more praise they receive, the greater the gap becomes between their private insecurities and their public persona. They live in constant terror of the day the world realizes they are just an ordinary, flawed human being. This psychological dissonance creates an unbearable state of tension. To resolve it, the subconscious mind decides that an intentional, controlled explosion is preferable to the agony of waiting to be exposed. If they expose themselves through a public failure, the hidden truth is finally out, the secret is revealed, and the terrifying expectation to be a god disappears instantly. Look at history, and you will see this psychological blueprint written everywhere. Consider the legendary billionaire Howard Hughes. By his 30s, Hughes was one of the most successful men on earth, a brilliant aviation pioneer, a Hollywood movie mogul, and a billionaire industrialist. He had conquered every industry he touched. He was a global icon of peak performance. But as his wealth and public visibility reached an absolute pinnacle, his internal psychological thermostat hit its breaking point. The pressure to maintain the illusion of flawless genius became an existential threat. He didn't just retire, he systemically dismantled his own presence. He locked himself away in darkened screening rooms, refusing to cut his hair or nails, living in total isolation, and intentionally destroying his public status. While many factors clearly contributed to Hughes' complex decline, his story illustrates how extraordinary success can become psychologically overwhelming. From the inside, it can feel like a desperate reclamation of personal autonomy. When the public myth becomes too heavy, chaos can look like the only remaining tool for liberation. The tragic paradox of the high achiever is that the very mechanism they use to find freedom often leaves them trapped in a cycle of regret and isolation. Burning your life to the ground is an incredibly expensive way to get some rest. To break this loop, we have to fundamentally change how we view excellence. True autonomy does not require the destruction of everything you have built. It requires the decoupling of your personal identity from your professional output. You are not your metrics. You are not your status. You are the human being underneath the achievements. Moving past the cycle of self-sabotage means building a life that allows for intentional mediocrity in non-essential areas. It means giving yourself permission to be flawed, tired, and unoptimized, without needing to trigger a catastrophe just to earn a break. The next time you feel the overwhelming urge to ruin everything you've built, recognize it for what it truly is, a desperate cry for boundaries, not a desire for ruin. True excellence isn't the ability to stay on the pedestal forever. It is having the courage to step down on your own 2 feet, before your mind decides to push you off.